Rabbi.
Hi, everyone. Oh, hi, Sherry. Okay, I guess we should start, and then anyone comes on, right? We'll let them in.
Yes.
Oh, somebody's having trouble logging in. Hold on a second. Lila, can you want to wait one more minute, maybe?
We usually give a couple more minutes, Rabbi. Some
and-
people have a hard time getting
And
on.
people are still joining.
Yeah, but
People are
Lynn
joining.
disappeared somewhere.
Rabbi, people are still joining too, so let's
Okay.
let them
Hey, I'll take my Shabbos snooze, and I'll be back in about 10 minutes. And by the way, no, I'm not in Jerusalem. And behind me, this is the temple. I like it the way the second temple was in
in.
Jerusalem. And there we are. So
You weren't there, though.
no, I'm not there. I wish I was there. That'd be amazing considering I was at Temple Sinai last
We all
night.
were there. We all were there. Oh, no, on Sinai. We're all at Sinai, yeah.
Yeah, that's why I should get it back next time. I'll get a background of Mount Sinai, or what they think is Mount Sinai.
Okay.
Jim, nice to see you. By the way, everyone, Jim is actually creating a very wonderful program for the residents of Harbor's Edge that I go to on each Shabbat afternoon about 1:30ish, and enabling the people there to be able to watch on the TV our services. And he's worked out this incredible technology, which I have no idea how it works. So God bless Jim. And then also Jim has been assisting me every week. And again, those of you who wish to come down to Harbor's Edge on Linton before Congress, before A1A, just slightly east of 1. You can just let me know, because I have to clue you in how to get in past the guardhouse. But they're very nice, right, Jim? The people are lovely.
They are lovely, Rabbi, and it might be easier said that it's catty cornered from Trader Joe's. Everybody knows where Trader Joe's is.
Oh,
On Federal Highway. It's right by the Intracoastal Waterway.
So I'll be with Rabbi two more Fridays, and after that, I'm hoping that it'll be a self-sustaining thing with the online. I'll give you a little hint here. The lady that I work with, her name is Emmy, E-M-I, and she is a Spanish lady and necessarily Catholic. And so what I did to sweeten the deal was to tell her about her ability to get onto the daily masses, whatever they do. And so, yeah, she's taken that up already. And I'm just hoping that there will be enough calls for, hey, where is our service, that they will do that. They've got the equipment to do it now, and they just need a person to push the right button for the service.
Yeah, thank you, Jim. And also to say is that Jim has been assisting me, like I said, in that he helps people get on the right page in our prayer book that we use, whatnot, give out the wine that we have for Kiddush. So if anyone wants to fulfill the mitzvah, just let me know, and we'll talk about it.
Are there many Jewish residents at Harbor's
yeah.
Edge?
Majority are Jewish.
Oh,
We gather about 15 or so people coming every Shabbat. It's a rehab center, so you have people coming and going, although some people have been there I guess I'm now into my 3rd month. Some people, some of them might never go home, unfortunately. And what's nice is some of the staff comes down and they're clapping to Havenu Shalom Aleichem and having a good time. And then sometimes family members. So it kind of gets, yesterday they kept on joining us, which is obviously nice. Okay, Eric, how we go? Let's start.
Okay,
well, Lynn is coming in.
Okay, well,
yeah, but she sometimes is very.
That's
Yeah.
let's
Give
get
her a minute.
started.
I'm
And
gonna
it's-
mute
gonna
everybody
start?
and then I'll unmute
Okay.
the rabbi. I think we're gonna go ahead and
Okay,
start.
so hit the record.
We're recording we're on YouTube now. We've been on YouTube. So yeah, that's okay. Here, I'm gonna
We
mute
need
everybody.
to say the bracha.
So Shabbat Shalom, everyone. And going to in the bracha for study. And just remind you that the last words are Lasok b'divrei Torah, which Lasok means to be engaged in, b'divrei Torah, in the words of Torah. And we're going to be doing that today. So we join together. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam Asher Kedeshanu B'mitzvotav V'tzivanu Lasok B'divrei Torah. Amen. Now, notice for those of you who know Hebrew, it doesn't say Lilmod B'divrei Torah, to study the words of the Torah. It uses the word in this bracha, this blessing. Everyone can hear me, right? Okay, everyone. Okay. It uses the very interesting word lasok, to be engaged in, because our study of Torah should be an engagement of ourselves, our minds, maybe our bodies, our souls, in trying to understand what is being stated and taught through the words that we study, in order to obviously better our lives. That's the goal. And so it really is an engagement, and in some cases to struggle. And by the way, some of the sayings of the rabbis that we're going to be studying these 3 weeks are going to be a little disturbing to some of you, and that's okay. And we're going to talk about it. And so the word lasok is used here, not just to study, but to be engaged with the text. So some of you might be familiar with this Pirkei Avot, others of you not. Pirkei Avot, the word Pirkei means chapters. Avot literally means the fathers. However, as most of the modern translations have become, and by the way, if you were to go to Amazon or wherever you go online for your books, for your Jewish texts, God knows, I mean, I never counted. I can't even imagine. There could be maybe 100 different versions of Pirkei Avot. Some of them are the straight text. Others of them are texts with commentaries. As you'll see when we go through this, there really isn't a whole lot of room to play with in terms of the translation. Take, for instance, the Torah, the Bible. There are numerous translations, and each one is an interpretation. In this text, the words are kind of obvious for those of you who know Hebrew. It's written in Hebrew, are kind of very, very straightforward. When we get into our interpretation is, what do these words mean to us individually? So, Pirkei Avot is one of the smaller tractates or sections in a much larger work that's called the Mishnah. The Mishnah is a compilation of the discussions of the rabbis, which was put together in the year 200 of the Common Era. So therefore, the 3rd century BCE, it was compiled. But basically, the compilation are the words, the teachings of the rabbis from the previous century. So therefore, the 2nd century, and maybe even the 1st century, obviously in Eretz Yisrael. Oh, by the way, you'll notice in the little chat down below, listed the sponsors for today. If you want to find out who they are, or if your name is listed because you sponsored, check it out. And we thank whoever sponsored it today. Afterward, go back to your kitchen and enjoy an oneg, enjoy some food in honor of this Shabbat. Anyway, is that the Mishnah, for any of you who have studied it, is one of the most important compilations in our Jewish religious library. It ultimately becomes the basis for our Jewish life today, whether we're Reform, even conservative, certainly even Orthodox, obviously with different interpretations. The Mishnah is a very, what should I say? I was going to use the word complicated, but actually is complicated in its simplicity. It really does not add to its verbiage. It is very concise. And why? Because then it was easy for the rabbis to memorize it. It is basically a series of discussions about Jewish life in the 1st and 2nd centuries of the Common Era. Does this, therefore, if you are to read the Mishnah, whether in the Hebrew, and it's written in Hebrew, or in English, or any other language, would you be able to walk away with an idea of the way our ancestors lived 2,000 years ago? Yes and no. Why? Because it does not have all of the discussions of the rabbinic academies that began to develop, particularly after the Second Temple was destroyed by the Romans in the year 70. There it is behind me, but before it was destroyed. It looks pretty good, huh? Yeah. And by the way, the building, that big building in the entranceway behind me, that is a depiction of the Kodesh Kodeshim, the Holy of Holies, where the high priest went in on Yom Kippur afternoon to pray for the forgiveness of the sins of the community and himself and his family. So, the Mishnah, there are other books, not only the Mishnah. We have some of them, and others have been lost over the centuries. But the Mishnah became the most important one and actually becomes the basis of another very, very important text, which is what? The Talmud. The Talmud was compiled in the year 400 of the Common Era in Jerusalem, in the year 500 in Babylonia. The Talmud is a commentary or an expansion of the Mishnah. So this is not a class in Talmud, and so I'm not going to go into that, but only to say in the Talmud, you would have a quotation from the Mishnah, and then you would have the discussion of the rabbis endlessly on that Mishnah. The Mishnah itself is basically a book of halakha, of Jewish law, governing behavior of Jews during this period of time I just described. The Talmud doesn't only just have, this is what you do, this is what you don't do, but actually goes into depth about the discussions of the rabbis about many of these laws. So, what's very interesting about the Pirkei Avot is that it is unlike any other of the, I forget the number, I could look it up, but anyway, I think there are 63 tractates to the Mishnah. Am I right, Lynn? Yeah, pretty good guess, huh? Woo. I could have said 64, could have said 62, 63. All right, it is the only one out of all of them that actually discusses in a very direct way, this rabbi said that, this rabbi says this is what he said, with no cross discussions, no cross comments. It is a book basically using a word which really became much more important in Jewish tradition community much later on, and that is musar, and that is how to behave ethically and morally. So that's what we're going to be looking at. We're not going to get through all the sayings. We could possibly, we'll see how it goes. I'm going to, in a few moments, ask Eric to unmute everyone, not yet, Eric, because this way I'm going to open it up for conversations as we read through them. However, if the conversations get too long, I might have to make some adjustments in this, because otherwise we'll be here all afternoon. I can't wait. Judy made key lime pie for Oneg, and I can't wait to have it, so I can't be on too long. I wish I could give you some, but, well, sorry. Anyway, she's my sponsor today, my wife. So, anyway, is that I'm going to share with you, according to the tradition, there is a reading that is a very small prayer and / reading that is offered before you study Pirkei Avot and then afterward. However, I'm going to bring the following up on the screen. This is why I love Jewish learning, because I Googled Pirkei Avot and I found the following. Can everyone see that? Is it big enough for you? I can make it bigger. Okay, very big. Okay. We are going to be studying there's 6 chapters to Pirkei Avot. So I'm going to try to do 2 each of the 3 weeks, okay? And then the class goes back to the regular Torah study class on Shabbat afternoons. Now the question becomes when is Pirkei Avot studied? By the way, you can study anytime you want to, okay? You're not limited to anything. And I'm not going to read through this whole long, the word comes to mind, Geschichte, in other words, the whole thing here. But it points out the different customs that even occur for the reading and study of Pirkei Avot. A responsum attributed to Rav Sar Shalom Gaon, the Gaon of Sura. Sura was one of the major academies in Babylonia. Notice 848 to 853, the 9th century of the Common Era, or possibly this other one. And he said the following, and thus said Rav Sar Shalom Gaon, or possibly this other rabbi, Rav Nataronai Gaon, A Gaon is an exalted sage, a very high level of wisdom. It is the custom of the house of our teacher in Babel, in Babylonia, that after Tefillat Mincha, after the afternoon Shabbat service on Shabbat, one recites Avot, okay, and Kinyan Torah, which is the 6th chapter of the Avot by heart. Okay, so immediately we have this thing here that says that every Shabbat of the entire year, after the afternoon service is over, is that you're supposed to recite a chapter of Pirkei Avot, and also a part of the last chapter, the 6th chapter of the book, and also notice by heart. That's why, as you'll see in a few moments, and I know some of you are saying, get on with this, Rabbi, we want to see Pirkei Avot already, is that you'll notice they are very concise, brief, to the point suggestions. It's actually amazing that such rabbis could speak so succinctly. Now, on the other hand, there were obviously other customs. The first chapter every Shabbat all year long. Every Shabbat morning in Spain in 1340, you read it every Shabbat morning, not afternoon. Another rabbi, Abu Draham, said from Pesach to Shavuot, which is the period of time we're in right now. And then another rabbi said, all summer long, you're supposed to do this. Then another one said, even on Shabbat, which fell on Shabbat, you're supposed to do it. Another one said from Shavuot until Sukkot. So that's totally different than what we're doing. We're doing it now between Pesach and Shavuot. This one said from Shavuot to Sukkot. There are all of these, and it goes on, by the way. There are 3 pages of examples of the different customs of doing Pirkei Avot. So I am, without speaking to Lynn or Betty or the ritual group, whoever it is here at Sinai at this moment, and I'm making a minhag, a custom. Every single year at this time, we will study Pirkei Avot or some other rabbinic works or writings at this time of the year between Pesach and Shavuot. Do I get a vote? Everyone raise your hand who's interested. Okay. Okay, some of your hands not going up yet, you're not sure yet. Okay, some are abstaining. Write that down, Lynn. Some abstentions. Okay, so now, Pirkei Avot. And Eric, if you do me a favor and unmute everyone.
Hey, Rabbi,
Okay.
people can unmute themselves.
Oh,
Everybody
you can
can
unmute yourself. Okay, so be kind.
Okay.
Be kind. Okay, here we go. I hope you can see this. I tried making it bigger. Oh, maybe here. No. Oh, maybe here. Oh, here. Oh, good. Wow. Okay, can everyone see that comfortably? Okay. I'm not going to do it in the Hebrew, okay, because otherwise it'd take much too long. Okay. This is the very well-known first chapter. Moses received the Torah at Sinai and transmitted it to Joshua. Remember, Joshua was the successor of Moses. Joshua to the elders to the prophets, and the prophets to the men of the great assembly. Okay. This was a group of, notice it doesn't say rabbis, it says men of the great assembly. Sorry for all the females in our study group. As I'm sure you know from traditional Judaism, really, in those days, was all about men. They said 3 things. And by the way, if anyone has any comments along the way, just unmute yourself. But, oh, I just forgot. That's right. I forgot the prayer I was supposed to do before we study. So let me go to that. Okay. Before we study, I'm going to read this first in Hebrew and translate. Kol Yisrael yesh lahem chelek leolam haba. All of Israel has a portion, a place in the world to come, which means our souls will have an eternal existence in the life after this one. Shene'emar, that it is said in Isaiah chapter 60, verse 21, which reads, the people shall all be righteous, and they shall inherit the land of Israel forever. Okay, so that's what you're supposed to read before you read Pirkei Avot. Remind me to read the closing one later. Okay, they said 3 things, the men of the great assembly. Be patient in the administration of justice. Raise many disciples and make a fence around the Torah. As you will see, many of the statements in Pirkei Avot are not written for the average person, for you or I, but rather were written for judges or those who were in the position of being judges. As far as I know, lawyers had not been invented yet. But there were those who judged people's actions, especially if they obviously violated Torah law. But one part of this first teaching is very, very important. It actually becomes a part of Orthodox Judaism today. In Hebrew, v'asu siyag l'Torah, make a fence around the Torah. Orthodox Judaism is based upon Torah law. And Torah law can be very, very restrictive. It says later on in the Jewish religious writings that you can make a law stricter, but you cannot make it any easier until the Messiah comes. And why? Because the writers and the creators and the sustainers of a traditional Jewish life were very concerned that something like Reformed Jews would come along and start questioning the customs and the laws and tearing the whole thing apart. So the word here is a fence, but actually I would translate it as being a wall.
Crush.
Right.
Youth.
Siyag, yeah. And to give an example of this, take for instance the recent holiday of Pesach. Outside of the land of in the Torah specifically says that Pesach, the feast of matzah, shall be observed only for 7 days. However, outside of the land of Israel, they added an 8th day. Same thing with the week of Sukkot. And why? Because as Jews began to populate outside of the land of Israel, before printed calendars, it was questionable as to determination of when a holiday starts. And that becomes important, obviously, for the sake of community of Jews everywhere in the world, starting Pesach, Sukkot at the same time. And so they added 24 hours a day to each of those holidays. They added a 2nd day to Rosh Hashanah. They added a 2nd day to Shavuot in a couple of weeks. Shavuot on the traditional calendar, on the Reform, only 1 day, that would be Thursday night, Friday, the 25th, 26th. But on the traditional calendar, they added a 2nd day, Friday night and Saturday, also Shavuot 2nd day. So now we have printed calendars. We have funeral homes, print calendars. We have Publix that prints calendars. We got Jewish calendars. There's no question. We all know throughout the world we have apps now on our cell phones, smartphones, to tell us when to start a holiday. So you might say, well, good. Let's take the day away and celebrate Pesach for 7 days and Rosh Hashanah for 1 day, etc. But because of this ruling here, make a fence around the Torah, in traditional or Orthodox Judaism, they say, no, we can't take it down. We can't make it easier before the Messiah comes. Okay, next one. Unless someone has a comment, and then kind of just take your mute away, and then you can speak. Shimon, now notice what's special here. The first one, they just said they didn't give a person's name, but now they do. What is very important in Judaism is citations. We need to give what's called in Hebrew, in Yiddish, kavod, in Hebrew, kavod, to the person who stated it. It's basically to make sure that you're not plagiarizing, okay? You want to cite who said it and give that person credit. So there was a guy named Shimon, a rabbi should say, obviously he's a man guy, Shimon HaTzadik, that's what he was known as. Okay, he was one of the last men of the Great Assembly, so we know he was tied into this. And by the way, this first teaching here, the first paragraph, really is very important because tying it all the way back to Moses gives all of these statements credibility. If I stood up on Friday night and I said, you know something, this whole sermon, everything I'm teaching you tonight, I just made up a few minutes ago. Hopefully you respect me enough to say, wow, that's pretty cool, Rabbi. Boy, you made this whole thing up. That's amazing. On the other hand, some of you might say, well, where'd you get this from? That sounds like somebody else. And obviously, credibility is very important, especially when you're giving teachings. And for a rabbi, you want to eventually tie everything in to where? Torah, the source. Okay. Shimon the righteous was one of the men of the last of the men of the great assembly. He used to say, the world stands upon three things. Now, this is pretty amazing. When it says the world stands, what does that mean? It means the world, let's change the word stands in Hebrew down here. God bless you. Okay. Omer. It means the world exists upon three things. This is a very powerful statement. Some of you might have heard of the Lamed Vavniks, the statement that the world exists because there are 36 righteous people in the world who do not know who they even are. So everyone has to be righteous because we could be among them. Here it's this Shimon ben Tzaddik said the world continues to exist because of three things. And yes, is Pirkei Avot Jewish centered? Okay. It doesn't say Torah, Quran, New Testament, the Gospels. It simply says Torah. Yes. This is a book written by Jews for Jews. The Torah, the temple service. By the way, it's not talking about Temple Sinai, as wonderful as our services are. It's talking about what? The services of offering sacrifices to what? In the Holy Temple in Jerusalem, which at the time of Shimon ben Righteous still existed. He lived before 70. And the practice of acts of piety. We would like to think that, yes, that is true. And that means that what? The world exists because of the good deeds that we perform, and you'll see what they are as we move along. Any questions or comments? Eric?
So, Rabbi, okay, I have a question also. I can, even though many people can't see, I can see everybody's video. So raise your hand. I will, then we'll do it in order, or just go ahead and jump in when you can. The question I have is about the Great Assembly. Is that the Sanhedrin? Is that what that's being referred to?
No, that's before the Sanhedrin.
So what is the Great Assembly?
A group of obviously scholars who got together in a very undefined fashion and discussed Jewish life. There was, before the temple in Jerusalem was destroyed, there were groups of scholars. There were no rabbis yet as such, but there were groups of scholars studying Jewish law and life and basically figuring it out, how to do this and what did God want us to do. This became very important because even before the destruction of the temple in the year 70, Jews were living outside of the land of Israel. There were Jews all over. There were Jews in Europe already. There were Jews in North Africa there already. There were Jews in Egypt already. There were Jews possibly even east already, maybe even as far as the Far East. We don't know. There are a lot of discussions about the 12th tribe and all those kind of things. So that there were already men of the Great Assembly sitting around discussing it. But the Sanhedrin did not occur until after the destruction of the temple, when rabbis got together in 70 rabbis actually, got together in a very specific forum called the Sanhedrin, which we could liken to the Congress today, voting on Jewish law expressed in the Talmud. Okay?
Thank you, Rabbi. Steve and Lori have their hand up too.
Yeah, thanks, Eric. Rabbi, with respect to Torah, we're not just talking about the 5 books of Moses. We're talking about all of the Jewish literature, including even the oral Torah, are we not?
Yes and no. Because
Okay.
remember, the Talmud had not been written yet. This is the year, this is probably, actually, if someone wants to Google Shimon ben Righteous, someone Google is Shimon ben Righteous, the righteous, and let me know what year he lived. But I'm quite sure, I know, obviously, this was certainly before the Talmud, because this is in the Mishnah. So therefore, there was not that part of the oral law yet. But Torah, therefore, basically, particularly meant the 5 books of Moses, but there was already, the Torah is expanded to mean anything of the discussions of the sages, which could be considered to be the word of God. Very good. Any other?
Follow-up question though, on the second part of it, it's like a three-legged stool. If one leg goes away, the whole thing falls. So we
Right.
don't have temple service anymore. So what is the substitute then for temple service? Is it prayer or something else?
Oh, yeah, a prayer, exactly. And that's another discussion altogether, another class. But once the temple was destroyed, the rabbis had to retool Judaism to continue. And they substituted for the three times of worship, morning, afternoon, and evening, when they offered sacrifices to God, then put in prayer services, Shachrit, Mincha, and Mariv. Yes. Oh, by the way, I just looked it up. Shimon the righteous was a Jewish high priest, interestingly enough, during the second period. In other words, as I said correctly, he lived before the year 70. And so this is very, very early on in the development of Jewish life. Okay, good questions. Continuing. Antignius, a man of Socho, interesting name, it almost sounds what? Greek, right? Yeah, of course the Greeks were before the Romans, received the oral tradition from Shimon the righteous. So notice there's a very important thing here. People not only mentioned their name, where their name was only mentioned, but where they got the teaching from. That's very important for the kavod of the teacher, to give honor to one's teacher. He used to say, number one, do not be like servants who serve the master in the expectation of receiving reward, but be like servants who serve the master without the expectation of receiving reward, and let the fear of heaven be upon you. Who's the servant? Us. Who's the master? God. God. Okay. So this is a very simple teaching. In other words, do not be a servant of God to do the things that God asks us to do, expecting a reward. I will put it another way from an experience I had as a chaplain at Sloan Kettering. And this woman said to me that she was convinced the reason why she had stomach cancer was because she ate treif. Now, whether we got to get involved in the psychology of that and the mechanisms involved with such a statement, but in talking with her after a while, not initially, first obviously talking about the feelings that she was going through and et cetera with the cancer. But I said to her, did you keep kosher because you thought it would protect you from ever getting sick? Now, of course, many of us live in magic, and we believe that if we do certain things, everything is going to be fine. If life worked that way, then we'd be doing a lot of things probably different than we are now. But Antignius's statement addresses this. It says we should never think this way. We should live a Torah life, whether you keep kosher or not, or observe Shabbat, or whatever it is, Pesach, what does it matter? Or just being a good person. How many people have said, and maybe some of you have said this also, I don't understand why I'm sick. I'm such a good person. Why is God doing this to me? Well, you hopefully weren't a good person in the hopes that you never get sick. Life doesn't work this way, to say the least. Some of you might remember from last night that we mentioned Rabbi Harold Kushner, who passed away, I think, within the last 2 weeks. In his book, Why Do Bad Things Happen to Good People? Exactly. Guess what? Bad things happen to people who live a Torah life on any level, whether they're Satmar Hasidim or the righteous Reform Jews. Okay. And let the fear of heaven be upon you. But on the other hand, you got to take all of this seriously, because God is watching what we do and what we don't do.
Rabbi, Lynn had a question. Lynn has a question.
Okay, I only can see a small strip of
I
folks.
can see everybody. I can see everybody.
You're like God.
My question goes to the English interpretation translation of the word fear. Is that really what's in
Yes.
the Hebrew?
Yes.
Okay, because
I'll go back to this. V'yehi morah. The word morah is the word for fear. Such as,
okay, and
yeah. Yeah.
I really find that word troublesome in many ways, because, all right, so in the prayer that you taught us before we started the reading, thinking of the world to come, I understand. So the fear of heaven may be linked to that, but is it more a case of awe than fear? Because those are two different words as I define them.
Yeah, definitely. And there are many people who play with this, to be sure. Well, sometimes if you believe that there is a God who interacts with us, I will not speak about Temple Sinai. I'll talk about Bnei Israel up north. If there was a family that was in arrears and a child's bar mitzvah was coming, the board of directors, the president would call that person up and say, if you don't pay up, we're going to cancel a bar mitzvah. So quite often there's a level of fear in that's placed upon that family to get them to do the right thing. Remember, much of traditional Jewish life is modeled after the relationship between a child and a parent, or a servant and, well, King Charles, okay? Thinking of the coronation today, King Chaim. And therefore, there is that level of fear. Should it be awe? Yeah. We should follow what our parents say because we're in awe of them. But on the other hand, I remember once when my mom did wash my mouth out with soap because I said a bad word. And guess what? I never did it again. So
my definitions are different than what you're sharing with us.
Yeah.
I just don't see it as such a negative, fearful.
Well, quoting, for those of you who are familiar with the wonderful comedy routine of Mel Brooks and Carl Reiner, The 2,000-Year-Old Man, when Carl says to Mel Brooks, the 2,000-year-old man, were you there when the first person ever prayed? And Mel Brooks, the 2,000-year-old man, said, yes, I was the one. I uttered the first prayer ever. And so what was that prayer? Well, there was this giant Phil approaching me, and I simply let out a geshrai, and I said, oi, Phil, don't step on me. So that's the prayer, fearful of being stepped on. But yes, Lynn, I'm hearing you, and there is, the word morad does mean literally fear of heaven.
Rabbi?
Because
Rabbi?
I just say, Sherry, because
Sherry, this is Sherry.
Sherry,
We have this book
Yeah.
and it's the book of Pirkei Avot,
Art
Art Scroll Messiah, and it uses the word awe.
Yeah, it could be either way. Yeah, but the traditional system, based upon the Torah, is definitely one of fear of. It's basically going back to the prophets actually and the Torah. It's a fear. It's a reward and punishment system. Whether we like that or not, or whether we agree with it, that's where we all come in and can react and interpret this on our own. Okay. Yossi ben Yoezer, a man of Sareda, and Yossi ben Yochanan, a man of Jerusalem, received the oral tradition from them. In other words, from the previous mentioned rabbis. By the way, I'm using Sephariah here. Any of you can go on your computer and see this, as well as a wealth of Jewish texts. Yossi ben Yoezer used to say, let thy house be a house of meeting for the sages, and sit in the very dust of their feet, and drink in their words with thirst. Basically, he was saying to revere your ancestors, to revere the elderly in your community, not simply to discard them. And this really is so very, very important. And there are some people who believe is really lost in today's world. I will not get involved in politics, I promise you, but that a person should not be in any office in this country only because of their chronological age and number, I think is silly. Rather, if the person can't function, that's one thing, but just by age itself. And why? Because sometimes those who are on in years have a certain wisdom, I think we'd all agree here, of experience that is worthy, that we should sit at their feet and not simply say, oi, you're old. Forget it. Let's put you on, a floating iceberg somewhere and just let you go. And this is what this statement is saying. Steve, is your hand up again?
Yes, it is, Rabbi. I was going to comment. There's an interesting commentary on this particular part of the Pirkei Avot, is that sometimes we as Jews are reluctant to get involved in study or in services because we have a limited self-image about what we know. And I think that this particular part of Pirkei is saying, don't let that hold you back if you have a restricted self-image. That sit with a scholar as we do on Saturday morning, or as I do on Wednesday when I study Talmud here in Houston. You have to learn, and sometimes you don't hold yourself back because you don't know.
Yeah, very good point. Thank you for that addition. Okay, continuing. Yossi ben Yochanan, a man of Jerusalem, used to say, now he's not quoting here a previous teacher, let your house be open wide and let the poor be members of your household. Okay, I'm going to stop there for a moment because the next sentence is going to get into a lot of trouble. Okay. However, the beauty of this is that your house should be open for everyone. And quite often one can say, if there's a law that is written or a statement made, it's because people are doing the opposite. All right. So therefore, here, obviously, there were those amongst the elite class in Jerusalem who were not allowing the poor to be a part of their lives, were excluding them from the community. And obviously, let the poor be members of your household. It doesn't mean to make them your children, but simply meaning, I think, let them come in. By the way, for any of you who have other commentaries, etc., translations, please, like Sherry did a little while ago, or Stephen's doing, just chime in. Now, the next one, engage not in too much conversation with women. They said this with regard to one's own wife, and how much the more so does this rule apply with regard to another man's wife. Obviously, again, they in this male-centered community world, they saw women as a source of temptation, and women basically never involved in anything serious, etc. We will just skip over this part, but you should know it's here. Okay. From here, the sages said, as long as a man engages in too much conversation with women, he causes evil to himself. He neglects the study of the Torah, and the end, he will inherit Gehenna. Gehenna is the Hebrew word for hell. Yes, we do believe in a hell. When we die, our neshama will go first to the lower world of Gehenna, of hell. Most of us will be discarded quickly and sent up to Gan Eden, which is the Garden of Eden, which is the Jewish phrase for heaven. But Judaism does believe, and again, going back to Lynn's statement, we might personally have difficulties with this, but we cannot ignore the tradition, and that is Judaism does believe in heaven and hell. Judaism does believe in a system of judgment upon our soul that will affect our future existence. Okay, next one. Joshua ben Perechia and Nittai the Arbalite received the oral tradition from them. Joshua ben Perechia used to say, appoint for yourself a teacher, acquire for yourself a companion, and judge all men with scale weighted in his favor. Okay. What does this mean now? Appoint for yourself a teacher, that we understand. Okay. Today's world is very, very interesting one. We can appoint Google to be our teacher. It is so easy today to simply go on an app or a website, study something, and walk away and saying, guess what? I can now change the transmission in my car. Okay. Most of us do not have that ability. We really need to go to an expert, which we'll call a teacher, maybe learn from that person, and then may be able to do it. And so acquiring a teacher was always very, very important in Jewish tradition. That is how we learn. In today's world, obviously, it's very easy to self-teach. However, we have to be aware of that, because the question is, what are we actually learning? Notice the next one. I'm going to read it in the Hebrew. Ukenei lecha chaver. Acquire for yourself a chaver. The word chaver, usually they translate it here as companion. It actually means a friend. But it doesn't mean a buddy. Acquire for yourself. Well, we should all have buddies. Okay, it's always nice to have a buddy to enjoy whatever, playing golf with, riding a bicycle with, watching TV, whatever. And hopefully the special people in life are our buddies. But the word chaver is actually related to something else which is very important, and it actually means to acquire a study partner. Yeah. There is a Yiddish word chavruta, or Hebrew as well. And if those of you who grew up in an Orthodox setting and you went to yeshiva, you would be assigned a study chaver, a study partner, in a chavruta setting in which the two of you would read a text and argue, discuss back and forth. Again, just like the previous statement about a teacher, you want to have a chaver to help you to think out loud, to shake you up and say, you know something, what you said makes no sense at all. To be critical of your thinking, to do what? To sharpen your thinking, to sharpen your journey of learning.
Rabbi Stan has his hand up. Stan.
Okay, Stan?
No, that was what I was going to ask. The requirement of having a study partner when studying Torah.
Yeah, exactly.
But the question I also had was, what happens if the study partner is in agreement with you?
That's okay. Nothing wrong with that. Yeah, nothing wrong with that.
You can always argue with yourself.
You argue with this. Well, yeah. So for instance, I go on a weekly class with Daniel Matt, who's one of the greatest scholars of the Zohar. And he did actually the most recent incredible translation of it into English, obviously. And from that, and there are like 40 people in his online class, maybe even more now. And it's in English for those of you interested in this. And anyway, he encouraged all of us to get from the group a chaver, to develop a chavruta, a study partner. And so over these years, I've had a number of study partners that we Zoom together once a week before the class at night to go over this. Now, the next one is interesting. Ve'yeh dan et kol hadam l'chav sachut. Judge every person. Now, it's interesting. And Sherry, your text there, does it translate it differently than this? Judge all men, I would translate, of course, people. Judge all people with the scale weighted in his favor. I actually would translate this as to judge all people fairly. I'm not sure what these words mean in English, in his favor. That's not being very fair. Then you basically, Sherry, what does your translation say? You got a new.
Okay, yes, it says, judge everyone favorably.
Favorably. Okay. Well, there's difference even the word, I think, and maybe I'm too critical on the English here. They didn't mean the word favorably and in his favor. In his favor means you're basically favoring someone. If you're judging a person, give the person what? Maybe this means give the person the benefit of the doubt. Yeah. Don't be too critical. Nice. We shouldn't be. Okay. As the expression is, judge other people the way you would want to be judged yourself. Actually, we'll come up with one of those soon. Okay. Is everyone having a good time so far? Eric, is anyone falling asleep in front of you? No one falling asleep. No one's nodding off.
I can see, not that I can see.
Okay, thank God. Okay, Baruch Hashem. Okay, here we go. Nittai the Arborite used to say, I love some of these names. Ask yourself, what would the be for you? Okay, so see, I would say Eric the technologist. Okay, I say, okay, what is your the part? Because remember, 2,000 years ago, no one had there were no last names. You were known by your occupation, where you came from, etc. Okay. Nittai the Arborite used to say, keep a distance from an evil neighbor. Good idea. Okay. Do not become attached to the wicked. Good idea. And okay, this goes back to Lynn. Again, Lynn, we're going to come coming back to you because this is a traditional Jewish system. And do not abandon faith in divine retribution. In other words, no. And by the way, I hear, and we all heard what Lynn said before, but if we were to study the Yom Kippur liturgy, even in the Reformed prayer book, they do not get away from God is omnipresent and God is omniscient. God knows all and is watching what we're doing and interacting with it. If you want to call it punishment or you want to call it nudging, how many people I've met this man I met in a cardiac unit, and he said to me, you know something, this is now my third heart attack. God must be telling me something. Okay, knocking me in the head and say, wake up, idiot. Stop it, lose some weight and whatever, okay? Take care of yourself. This is it. But notice, do not abandon faith. In other words, do not abandon your belief. The word faith can be translated as belief in divine retribution. God is watching.
I have a question.
No, Seema has her hand up. Wait, Seema has her hand up
Oh,
first.
hand
You
up, hand
don't
up.
know what you're doing.
I don't-
That's the problem.
yeah.
Seema, you want me to unmute-
Actions.
you want me to unmute you, Seema? I'll unmute you. Go ahead. Okay, sorry, go ahead.
You're muted.
So here it is, keep a distance from an evil neighbor and do not become attached to the wicked. The one before that said, look upon all men favorably. So isn't there a contradiction? How can you look at everybody favorably? Because you know that there are evil neighbors and you know they are wicked people. So there are two different ideas are being talked to.
Okay, so Seema, let's play a game for a second, okay? You are Rabbi Seema, what would your the be? What would you say, the?
All right, okay, so it's two different opinions you're saying.
No. You have these two guys in your class, okay, in your chavruta group, in your study group. And what would you then do? They disagree with each other. So what would you come up with as a companion, as a friend? What would you say to them?
Well, I guess I would say there is evil in the world, so you can't really judge everybody favorably.
Yeah. So you'd be like the very smart rabbi in Fiddler on the Roof who said, you're right and you're right. Remember that scene in Fiddler, right? They're both right. In other words, yeah, you got to judge everyone favorably, but guess what? There's a point to which you have to recognize that some people are just evil and just stay away from them. You got to be careful, right? Yeah. Okay.
Well, that was a good thing to say. Yeah, like a Fiddler on the Roof. You got to play both sides. Yeah.
Yeah.
You know,
Yeah. But remember, first of all, there is no indication here, and maybe I should check that out, but I think from what I've read in preparation for today's class, these people were not in the same room with each other. In other words, these are a collection of sayings by these rabbis that I notice very often doesn't say rabbi, it doesn't say Rabbi Nittai, these scholars, these thinkers 2,000 years ago, but they weren't in the same room with each other. So it wasn't as if Nittai was saying in the same room as Joshua, okay, necessarily. Maybe they were, and they probably then had the discussion you're having, Seema. Good point. We don't know that. Okay. Actually, it'd be fun sometime. We could actually, if we get together at temple and we'll all dress up and I'll give out parts. And so Seema would be Nittai and someone would be Joshua, and we could have a whole discussion about this. Okay, next one.
I have a question.
Sure.
Hello? I have a question. Number 7 again. It says, do not despair of retribution. Is this retribution of God or retribution of a man?
God.
Like someone who can harm you?
No, God. And the idea,
that was what because it says, don't associate with a wicked person or someone who can harm you.
Now, in this case, it's God. It's God.
Okay.
Yeah. And when God, and I'm just speaking from traditional point of view, when God punishes us, it is not because God is evil and just wants to make our life miserable, but God is doing this to better us or to teach us something. Similar to, the child that does something bad and the parent punishes them, says, well, you're going to lose your allowance for the week. Okay. It's not that hopefully the parent is not doing that just to be evil, bad parent, but doing that to teach the child a lesson. Okay. Judah ben Tabai and Shimon ben Shetach received the oral tradition from them. Again, Judah ben Tabai said, do not as a judge play the part of an advocate. And when the litigants are standing before you, look upon them as if they were both guilty. And when they leave your presence, look upon them as if they were both innocent when they have accepted the judgment. And now this, obviously, they were speaking to judges at their time. Of course, we can think of the many court cases that are now in our world today. They sure are a lot of them, okay? It's basically saying that a judge must be very serious in terms of what? Seeing both sides equally and not showing preference for one side or the other. You can play the part of an advocate. As some of you might know, I was chair of the Suffolk County Human Rights Commission for 28 years. And we had 6 professionals who are called Human Rights Commission investigators. And people from various communities would come to them about situations of discrimination and what they saw as violation of various discrimination laws, either county, state, or federal. And people said, well, why don't you do this and why don't you do that for me? And it was very important. The investigator always had to say, we are an investigator, we are not an advocate. The Human Rights Commissioners, we as volunteers could be advocates for a certain community. But when they came before the investigator had to be, which is what basically the statement is saying, had to be impartial. Remember that wonderful statue of justice and the woman there with the scales? What's around her face? A veil. Justice has to be blind. Unfortunately, in today's world, that is not often the case, but I'm not going to discuss that. Okay.
Very true, Rabbi. Statue of justice is often peaking.
Oh, yeah. Yeah. Did you ever do that, Steve? I'm sure. Someone says, cover your eyes, and then you kind of keep your fingers a little bit open. Yeah.
Absolutely.
Absolutely. Yeah. Okay. Shimon ben Shetach used to say, be thorough in the interrogation of witnesses. Okay, again, to a judge. Be careful with your words, lest from them they learn to lie. Very interesting. Okay, again, for judges, very applicable to today's world. Shemaiah and Abtalion received the oral tradition from them. Shemaiah used to say, this is very interesting, love work, hate acting the superior, and do not attempt to draw near to the ruling authority. Very interesting. Again, imagine that these people living 2,000 years ago, you're living in a society, in a world in which you do not have the government. The government is what? Rome. Does Rome like the Jews? No. They hate us. They would like to do away with us completely, which they attempted to do at various times. So basically, when he says love work, sure, hate acting the superior, meaning do not see yourself as superior to other people, and do not be put in the position of the boss, because if you are, guess who's going to hate you then? Those people working under you. And do not attempt to draw near the ruling authority. In other words, do not play up to the government, because especially in those days, we could say the same thing possibly today in some communities, it will turn against you. Remember, this is Rome. Okay, there's so much. I'm going to, wow, so much here. Okay. Where am I to? Oh yeah, okay. Shemaiah and no, I did that one. Abtalion used to say, sages, be careful with your words, lest you incur the penalty of exile and be carried off to a place of evil waters. Now, what is this talking about? You are now a teacher. And remember, again, Rome is the occupying force. You have to be very careful with what you say, because guess what? Penalty of exile? Yeah. You say the wrong thing against the government, guess what? They will put you where? In prison, or in that case, carried off to a place of evil waters, or obviously executed. And the disciples who follow you drink and die. And thereby what you say does affect your students. Was pointed out quite a bit here in the Pirkei Avot, which are sayings by sages, obviously by the wise people at that time, rabbis and others. And that is what? You must be careful with what you say. And yes, a rabbi, and I always have taken this very seriously, although some of my colleagues haven't, and that is a rabbi as a position of importance in a community is to be held to a higher standard, whether one likes it or not. However, guess what? So to a police officer, so to a county executive, so to a senator or a congressman or the president of the United States or a king or a queen or a Supreme Court justice. When you're in a position of authority, what you say makes a difference. and thus the name of heaven becomes profaned. In other words, when a person in a position like that, notice what happened to Moses, right? Because he failed to do certain things, say certain things, he was punished by God and not allowed to enter into the promised land. And even though some of us might think, wow, just because he hit a rock rather than speaking to it, was that really so bad that he couldn't see the fruition of all of his deeds for all those years? Yeah, because Moses was in that position of authority. And guess what? Yeah, there is a double standard. That's the way it goes. What's that expression about, if you can't, well, I won't say it, about the fire, right? Get off the fire or something, right? If anyone helps me out here, please. Okay.
It seemed like you started off with this one as though it was talking, to authority and challenging authority, but then it sort of changed to if you are authority, you have to be careful with what you say. I'm a little confused.
Right. Well, they were talking to both kinds of persons. All of these things, most of these sayings of these sages can be taken either way, either personally to an individual or obviously to the person in authority. Yeah, exactly. Okay, we're now coming to the famous Hillel and Shammai. Hillel and Shammai are sort of like, what you call it, Schumer and McCarthy, okay, or something like that. Shammai would be considered to be a Republican. Hillel would be considered in our world today a Democrat. And they always disagreed with each other, although, unlike in today's world, they always found a compromise, always. Hillel was a Pharisee, Shammai was a Sadducee. They represented two distinct parties and actually belief systems in ancient Israel. Ultimately, all of our traditions are the teachings of Hillel, of the Pharisaic party. We are the recipients of the Pharisees, not the Sadducees that died out, because they became associated with the priestly class, and when the temple was destroyed, they went the way of all flesh. They just went off into the wilderness. Okay. Hillel, the great Hillel, I'm sure you've heard his name before, used to say, be of the disciples of Aaron, loving peace and pursuing peace, loving mankind and drawing them close to the Torah. Okay, I don't think those beautiful words need any comment. He also used to say, one who makes his name great causes his name to be destroyed. In other words, don't go around saying, boy, I'm so great. Boy, I published this. Oh, boy, I did that. I want my name here. I want my name there. Because guess what? Ultimately, you only destroy yourself. But don't forget to go on a Lador Vador wall, okay, in the temple, and put your name up there. One who does not add to his knowledge causes it to cease. In other words, keep on learning. One who does not study the Torah deserves death. Pretty strong statement. One who makes unworthy use of the crown of learning shall pass away. The rabbis, as Jews throughout our history, have emphasized what? Learning, learning, learning. That was education for Jews. Next week, I'm going to be talking about the Jewish mother for Mother's Day on Shabbat. That's going to be my sermon next week. And as we all know, for the Jewish mother, for the Yiddish mama, what was it all about? Oh, my son, you only got A's? You got to do better than that. Okay, what is that all about? It's all about what? Wanting those children to learn and learn and learn, because that's how you get ahead in the world. And now probably one of the most famous of all statements, Hu haya Omer, Hillel would say, Im ein ani li mili mili, uchshani liasmi ma'ani, v'imlo akshav ematai. He also used to say, if I'm not for myself, who is for me? But if I am for my own self only, what am I? And if not now, when? Such incredible words for all of us, obviously. If I'm not for myself, guess what? We do have to stand up. And again, this is like Erica pointed out, and I think someone else pointed out before. There are things that seem to be contradictions, but that's what life is. We gotta live on life is a balance between both sides all the time. I gotta be for myself. But I'm not. If I'm too much for myself, guess what? Then because guess what? In the end, who's going to really be for me? Well, we'd like to think, yeah, there are some people who will be there for me. Okay, for us. However, to be realized in the scheme of life, And some of us have learned that lesson. But if I'm only for myself, what am I? In other words, if you're only self-oriented, narcissistic and whatever, then what kind of a person are you? And obviously to get your act together right now. And I'm going to end with this one here, this part. Shammai used to say, make your study of the Torah fixed practice. In other words, whether it's every Saturday to study Torah in this wonderful program, the Zooming, or every day, these wonderful programs to study Torah. If any of you want help in developing a Torah study program, I'll be glad to meet with you. Speak little, but do much. There are a lot of people who talk a good game, right? Well, my God, I'm going to do this, I'm going to do that, whatever. But guess what? Words come easy. Doing is the hard thing. And then finally, receive all people with a pleasant countenance. In other words, when you smile, the whole world what? Smiles with you, right? Everyone put a smile on your face. Okay. So since I did say we're going to do chapter 2, I'm going to move down here for a second. Okay. And I'm going to end with this one now. Obviously, there's so much here. We could just spend probably a couple of weeks on probably just chapters 1 and 2, but we're not going to, unless someone wants to change the methodology here, we're just going to do it in this way. Rabbi said, now there was one guy who was called Rabbi. Notice up here, for those of you who know the Hebrew, Rabbi Omer. He was Yehuda Hanasi, who was the, we could call him the Senate Majority Leader. He was the person in charge of the Sanhedrin, Eric, the Rabbi, Yehuda ben Nasi, Judah the Prince. Okay, he was in charge. Rabbi said, what is the straight path that a man should choose for himself? In other words, what path should you take in terms of an ethical and moral life? One which is an honor to the person adopting it. Okay, in other words, you want to bring honor to, now, again, you could say, well, doesn't this contradict something we just read about doing too many things for your honor? You're not doing it for the glory. You're not doing it for the honor, but you should do something in which, yes, you are bringing honor to yourself. In other words, not making a fool of yourself or doing things that you shouldn't do. You want people to think highly of you. And on account of which honor accrues to him from others. You want to live a life so that, you know, some of you, I've told some of you some of this, you heard this last year, Judy and I ended up having to write our epitaph on a paper so that we could purchase graves over there at Eternal Light last year. And I had to write my own epitaph. And guess what? The question is, wouldn't we like every one of us to have on our gravestone, he was liked by others. He was appreciated by others. He was loved by others. That's the way, whether it's on the stone or not, it makes no difference. But rather it should say, you wanted to say, you know something, he was a good guy. He was a great woman. Okay, you want to live your life that way, whether it actually says that way or not, says it on there. Be careful with a light commandment as with a grave one. Don't kind of mince your ways with your commandments, for you do not know the reward for the fulfilling of the commandments. So obviously, don't say, well, you know something, I really can't stand that evil neighbor. I feel I'm going to murder that person. Oh, no, I'm not going to do that because God would really punish me. But on the other hand, so I won't light Shabbat candles next week. What it's saying here, don't measure one versus the other. Simply see them all as commandments for you to fill. Also, reckon the loss that may be sustained through the fulfillment of a commandment against the reward accruing thereby. In other words, just do what you have to do in a Torah life, and the gain that may be obtained through the committing of a transgression against the loss entailed thereby. In other words, just do the mitzvot, not worrying about the rewards, going back to Lynn's question early on. Yes, there is underlying all of this a reward and punishment system, but don't think about it. Don't say, wow, if I violate this mitzvah, something really bad's gonna happen to me, but this one, it's not so bad, I can get away with it. You're not supposed to think that way. Everything is equal in terms of the system and your relationship with God. Apply your mind to 3 things and you will not come into the clutches of sin. Okay, sin, doing something wrong. Know what there is above you, an eye that sees, an ear that hears, and all your deeds are written in a book. What book is it? Sefer HaChaim, the book of life. What is the eye that sees? What is the ear that hears? It's God's eyes and ears. They're always here. Wow. Pretty amazing stuff. Everyone agree? Anyone have any comments before we end for today? Does everyone, this is what you were hoping this would be?
Somebody has their hand up. Jerry's got his hand up. Jerry's
Where's
raised.
Jerry, wherever you are.
Want me to unmute you, Jerry? You're muted. I'll unmute you, Jerry. Okay, go ahead.
Can you hear me now?
Yes.
Oh yeah, hi. Hi, Jerry.
Hello. Rabbi, you slipped
How's-
something earlier about heaven and hell. You said those words. In my meager Hebrew education upbringing, that was never taught. In fact, I was sort of taught the opposite, that there is none.
You were taught, I hate to say this, but whoever taught you that was 100% wrong.
Where is it written? How did they miss it? Is it in the
No,
Torah?
they want, no, they didn't miss, the word missing implies, they like, oh boy, I missed that crack on the sidewalk and I fell down because you didn't see it. They did this intentionally. They're within the modern period of time, let's say the 20th century, whatever, is that there were those, particularly in the Reform and conservative movements, who wanted to basically take away this whole idea of heaven and hell, fear and punishment, all that kind of stuff, and simply say it doesn't exist in Judaism. But it certainly does without question.
Where does it exist?
Everywhere. It's in the Bible. It's in certainly all the writings, Mishnah, Talmud. It's throughout the religious literature, throughout.
So it is in Torah.
The reward and punishment system is in Torah. No, the Torah doesn't speak about hell. The Torah, the early parts of the Bible do not have a defined belief system of life after death. Everyone basically goes to the same place afterward. But as Judaism developed later on, there was definitely two places: Gehenna, which is hell, Gan Eden, which is heaven. And there was going to be a judgment and where people will go accordingly.
Esther has her hand up.
Yeah, so it's definitely there, Jerry. And how's Joyce? Okay, give her my love.
She's there.
Joyce.
Yeah.
Okay, Esther.
Yes, I just wanted to thank you for a very educational and enlightening study here.
No, thank you. You're going to go to heaven. Thanks.
I have one comment. I have a comment.
If you say so.
Lynn has her hand up. I want to come. Doesn't Korach, when the earth swallows them up, don't they go to, don't they go into a place in the ground, Sheol? Is that what it's called?
Well, Sheol, yeah. Well, no, it doesn't say that for him. They just disappear in the ground. I think there was probably a sandstorm or something. But anyway, no, that you can't associate the two. No.
Okay.
No.
Lynn's got her hand up.
Okay, so just a quick summary from my perspective of what's really embedded in chapter 1 and is basically in Torah is justice, truth, and peace. And I guess as we go on, it will be elaborated more by the sages.
Yeah. And I think also to add to that, as you can hear in some of the underlying themes, that we have to be mindful of what we say and what we do, because what we say and what we do have definite consequences. And you whether you're a judge sitting on a bench in a court of law, or whether you're the 22 of us here, it does make a difference. And I think that's an underlying theme as well. That's those words, say little but do much. And also when you're doing much, be careful of what you do. As any of you who are teachers or whatever in your life, with your children, your families, a teacher can destroy a student or uplift a student by simply one word. Yes, Doreen.
Doreen, you're muted. You want me to mute you, or can you unmute? Unmute. Okay, go ahead.
Thank you, Rabbi. I also want to echo Esther's comments. I thoroughly enjoyed your interpretation of the first and most of the second chapter, and I look forward to our next session.
Thank you. Some of you might know I've been translating actually for 50 years a 17th century Hebrew text on death and dying, and living and dealing with life for the existence of our neshama, of our soul in a future life. And as I say, and I do an online class every Thursday with 7 students from all over the country. Actually, now there's someone from England. And the reason why I bring this up is we're dealing with a 17th century text in which they saw the Jewish world and the relationship with God very different than most of us as moderns. But you have to look at the text for what it says, and then do your own interpretations, what makes sense to you or doesn't. So what I try to do here, as you notice, I'm not sugarcoating this text. They did see women a certain way. They did believe in heaven and hell and punishment and reward system with God. That was their system. That the text that I'm doing is a 17th century text. We're looking at a text 2,000 years old, and the way that they saw life and God and everything in a very different way than us, maybe, maybe not. Some of you might agree with this system, and that is certainly fine. But going back to Jerry's comment, I'll end with this, is that unfortunately, especially during the modern era, but even before that, that rabbis, yes, and teachers would skew their teachings based upon what they thought was the right thing to tell, okay? And therefore, there was in modern times, they tried to, many, especially in the Reform movement, tried to stay away from anything that would be perceived to be irrational or mystical. Stay away from it, and don't even act like it existed. But these things do exist in our tradition, and we'll find out more about them. So I will conclude with the words that we conclude with Avot. Kol Yisrael, oh, sorry, that was the opening one. Ribono Hanania ben Akashia Omer. Interestingly enough, there's another quote. There was a rabbi, Hanania, the son of Akashia, and he would say, Ratzah HaKadosh Baruch Hu lizachot et Yisrael, lefikach yirba lachem Torah u'mitzvot. The Holy One, blessed be He, that is God, wants all of Israel to be worthy of God's blessings. Therefore, He increased upon us the responsibility of Torah and mitzvot, as it says in Isaiah chapter 42, verse 21. The Lord was pleased with God's righteousness for God's own sake, to make the teachings great and glorious and loved by all. So hopefully these teachings are loved by all. And we're going to do this again next week, God willing.
Name the sponsors.
Yes, I'm going to read the sponsors. I want to read.
Go ahead.
Let the rabbi finish first, and then I'll do the.
Okay. Amen. Okay, go ahead.
Okay. The sponsors for the Rabbi's Torah study this week. You can sponsor next week if you'd like to. I'm sorry, Rabbi's Pirkei Avot study. And if you'd like to sponsor for next week, please let the office know. Sherry and Nathan Sklar, in memory of Nathan's father, Henry Sklar. Donna and Larry Lopater, in honor of their 61st wedding anniversary. Congratulations to Donna and Larry. Lila Goldman, in honor of Lori Weiss-Wolchin and David Wolchin, wishing them mazel tov on their on their boat.
Yeah, wish them good luck. Yeah. Also a lot of good luck. Yeah.
Safe sailing.
Safe sailing. Yeah.
That's it. Thank you, everybody.
Thank you, everyone. Have a great Shabbat.
This is on YouTube. It's been recorded on YouTube, so you can go back and listen to it later on too as well.
Shabbat shalom, everyone. See you.
Shabbat shalom.
Shabbat shalom, everyone. Stay healthy and safe. And thank you, Rabbi.
Thank you, Jane,
Thank
for
you
your
so
organization.
much. This was enlightening.
Good.
Thank you.
We look forward to next week.
Okay, bye.
Yes.
To the old temple.
Shabbat shalom.
Shabbat shalom.
Thank you, Janine.
Okay, guys. Bye, everybody. Have a
Bye.
good week. Great week. I'm going to end it for everybody now. Unless somebody has another comment, I'll just say bye, and it's going to end.
Bye.